A nation that is experiencing a staggering 9.2% economic boom is simultaneously bracing for a multi-front regional war. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a massive geopolitical powder keg in the Horn of Africa.
Yeah, it's a completely fascinating situation.
It really is. Our mission for you today is to unravel this high-stakes puzzle where, rapid modernization is colliding directly with existential resource panic, and the fallout could realistically stretch from the Sahel all the way to the Arabian Peninsula.
Exactly. And the lens we're using today to really dig into this is a highly charged viewpoint article from the Africa Report. It was published on May 20, 2026.
Right.
And it was written by Mohamed Rafi Abaraya, who is the Deputy Executive Director of the Institute of Foreign Affairs. So given his position, I mean, this isn't just some casual op-ed.
Definitely not.
No, it's a real window into the strategic calculus of the Ethiopian foreign policy establishment during a moment of, well, extreme regional volatility.
Right. But before we go any further, we need to be crystal clear with you, the listener. This article presents a very specific, fiercely Ethiopian perspective on the current crisis.
Yes, absolutely.
We are not taking sides here. We're not endorsing these claims, nor are we validating the accusations the author makes against neighboring nations.
Right. Our objective is purely to impartially unpack the author's arguments. We want to understand the complex geopolitical dynamics being alleged because, well, reading the board from the perspective of one of the main players is the only way to understand why the game is being played this way.
Speaking of reading the board, I like to think of this like a game of 3D chess, except the board is actively catching fire.
That is a very accurate way to put it, honestly.
So let's unpack this. How do we even begin to read a board where so many different actors are making moves at the exact same time?
Well, we start by looking at the threat matrix the author lays out. He essentially claims there is a massive proxy campaign underway to dismantle Ethiopia. He points to the northeastern Horn of Africa, alleging that the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, is forming a rogue regional government.
Which he notes is a blatant violation of the Pretoria Permanent Cessation of Hostilities Agreement, right?
Exactly. And he goes much further than just internal violations. The author claims the TPLF is externally aligning itself with the Eritrean government.
Wow.
Yeah, and simultaneously he points to Sudan, specifically under General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, trading these heated accusations with Ethiopia.
So a lot of moving parts.
A lot of moving parts. And his core thesis here is that this convergence is not a coincidence. It's a coordinated effort to encircle and isolate Ethiopia. He refers to this collection of actors as a proxy wrecking ball.
A wrecking ball.
Right, and he points the finger squarely at Egypt as the geopolitical architect swinging it.
Okay, wait, I have to pause on the mechanics of that claim.
Sure.
Because historically, some of these groups, like the TPLF and the Eritrean government, they are bitter, blood-feud rivals.
Oh, absolutely.
They have fought brutal conflicts against each other. What kind of gravity does Cairo supposedly possess to pull such distinct opposing forces into a single orbit against Addis Ababa?
Well, that dynamic is really the defining characteristic of effective proxy warfare.
How so?
Because proxy alignments do not require the foot soldiers to share an ideology or even a basic mutual respect.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they only require a shared immediate utility. So when a powerful external actor, in this case, allegedly Egypt, steps into a fractured landscape, they provide the necessary diplomatic cover, the funding, or the intelligence that shifts the immediate cost-benefit analysis for those local actors.
So you're basically talking about weaponizing local grievances.
That is exactly what the author is suggesting Egypt has done. By allegedly funneling support to Sudan, Eritrea, and the TPLF, Cairo isn't trying to make these groups allies.
Right. They just want to use them.
Exactly. They are trying to bind them together with the sole, temporary objective of tearing down the Ethiopian state. It's an asymmetric strategy designed to keep Addis Ababa trapped in perpetual border skirmishes and internal policing.
Stripping them of the capacity to project power elsewhere.
Precisely.
Which naturally brings up the motive. I mean, why would Egypt expend the massive political and financial capital required to orchestrate a regional wrecking ball?
Well, the author routes this entire sprawling conflict back to a single essential source.
The Nile River.
The Nile River. The Nile is the structural foundation of this entire crisis. We are looking at a fundamental dispute over water, power, and the future of regional development.
Right, because Egypt has historically claimed the lion's share of the Nile's waters.
Yeah, relying on colonial-era frameworks that essentially granted them a monopoly over the river's flow.
Which for Cairo, I mean, the Nile is not merely a natural resource, it is the absolute prerequisite for their agricultural and societal survival. But the reality of geography is that the river, or the Eve, as it is known domestically, originates largely in the Ethiopian highlands.
Yes, and Ethiopia is no longer just a passive observer of that geography. The author really highlights their massive modern development trajectory.
Yeah, he specifically points to the completion of the GERD, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, right alongside a new international airport and a major fertilizer plant.
He does, and then he drops that staggering statistic you mentioned earlier, an IMF projected economic growth rate of 9.2%.
This is just a massive number.
It is. And that 9.2% figure is really the engine driving the geopolitical friction. The author wields that number to demonstrate immense national resilience.
Yes, I was saying, look what we can do despite the pressure.
Exactly. He is signaling that despite the alleged encirclement and proxy warfare, the Ethiopian state is not just surviving, it is rapidly modernizing.
Transforming geographic potential into tangible economic power.
Yes, through these large-scale energy and irrigation projects in the Nile Basin.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a second regarding the author's framing here.
Go for it.
If we look at this neutrally, you have Ethiopia growing at an astronomical 9.2% and finalizing mega dams on the very river that Egypt relies on for its sheer survival.
Right.
Wouldn't Egypt view this as a legitimate existential threat? I mean, the author paints this as an arbitrary desire by Cairo to contain Ethiopia's rise, but from a purely hydropolitical standpoint, Cairo is staring down the barrel of agricultural collapse if those waters stop flowing.
You've just articulated perfectly what we might call the tragedy of asymmetric timelines.
Asymmetric timelines.
Yeah, so from the Ethiopian perspective, as outlined by Abaraya, utilizing the Abe is a sovereign right. Their timeline is driven by immediate economic modernization.
Right, lifting millions out of poverty and powering that 9.2% growth.
Exactly. They view historical water treaties that excluded them as illegitimate relics of a colonial past.
It's kind of akin to a joint bank account where one person has held the only debit card for a century, and now the other account holder has suddenly ordered a card and started withdrawing funds.
To build a house, exactly. That's a great analogy.
The first person feels robbed, while the second feels they are finally accessing what was always theirs.
That captures the friction perfectly. From the Egyptian perspective, which the author acknowledges but interprets as hostile overreach, any reduction in the Nile's flow is a literal threat to their drinking water and food supply.
Right, survival.
Yeah. So while the author frames Egypt's actions as an aggressive campaign of containment, a neutral observer might note that Cairo likely views its own alleged proxy orchestration as a desperate defense mechanism.
It's a clash of two absolute imperatives: Ethiopia's right to development versus Egypt's requirement for survival.
Exactly. And when two absolute imperatives clash, the fallout rarely stays localized.
No, it doesn't. And having established this intense hydropolitical motive, the author pivots to why you, the listener, sitting perhaps thousands of miles away in Europe or the Americas, need to pay attention to this potential meltdown.
Right. He maps out a very stark domino effect if this alleged proxy campaign succeeds in fragmenting the ancient Ethiopian state.
The scale of the collapse he envisions is colossal.
It really is. I mean, he is outlining the implosion of a nation of over 120 million people.
Which is just hard to even fathom.
The immediate result would be millions displaced, triggering a massive refugee crisis that would just wash over the Middle East and inevitably strain European borders.
And he goes further than just the migration impact.
It does.
He points to the creation of a massive security vacuum stretching from the Sahel all the way to the Red Sea and the Arabian Peninsula.
Right, and he explicitly names the beneficiaries of this potential vacuum. Extremist groups like Boko Haram, the Islamic State, and al-Shabaab.
He claims these organizations would gain unprecedented operational freedom across a contiguous corridor from Mali to Yemen.
Because, Ethiopia has long functioned as the geopolitical anchor state in the Horn of Africa. The international community, and particularly Western security apparatuses, rely on Addis Ababa to project stability in a deeply volatile neighborhood.
Right.
So the author is presenting a scenario where pulling up that anchor doesn't just sink Ethiopia, it capsizes the entire region, handing a massive territorial safe haven to the world's most notorious terror syndicates.
My geopolitical radar definitely went off reading that specific section.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, is the author laying out a genuine, structurally sound causal chain here? Or is this a deliberate rhetorical tactic,
Oh.
like a calculated help us or the world burns scenario, designed specifically to force Western powers to step in and pressure Egypt?
That is such a good question. And honestly, the brilliance of the article is that it functions as both simultaneously.
Oh, interesting.
The structural vulnerability is entirely real. State failure in much smaller neighboring nations has historically produced severe, cascading regional crises.
Right, we've seen that happen over and over.
Yeah. So given the sheer demographic weight of Ethiopia, its fragmentation would objectively supercharge the operational capacities of groups like al-Shabaab and worsen the instability belt stretching across the Sahel.
So the threat isn't a fiction, but the presentation of the threat is highly engineered.
Exactly. By explicitly naming Boko Haram and ISIS, and by emphasizing the migration threat to Europe, the author is pressing the exact buttons that trigger panic in Western defense departments.
He knows his audience.
He does. He is strategically aligning Ethiopia's localized national security interests, defending against Cairo's alleged proxies, with the overarching global security priorities of the West.
The subtext is basically, our fight is your fight.
Yep. If you don't rein in Cairo's wrecking ball, you will be fighting ISIS in the Red Sea and dealing with millions of refugees at your borders.
It is a masterclass in strategic communication. Which leads us to the final major piece of this puzzle. Ethiopia's tactical response.
Right.
If the stakes are this apocalyptic and the target is surrounded by this alleged proxy campaign, how is Addis Ababa reacting?
Well, according to the author, the Ethiopian playbook right now is defined by notable restraint and consistent calls for dialogue.
The author goes to great lengths to position Ethiopia not as a belligerent actor, but as the patient, responsible adult in the room.
He does. And to prove this, he points directly to the signing of the Pretoria Agreement.
The detail he includes there is vital to his argument.
It really is.
He emphasizes that Ethiopia signed that peace agreement at the exact moment when the ENDF was on the verge of taking Mekelle.
Yeah.
He uses that tactical pause to argue that Ethiopia actively chose a negotiated settlement over a total military conquest of the Tigray region.
Exactly. He is using that historical moment to signal current intent to the international community.
To show they prefer diplomacy over bloodshed.
Right. It's a way of demonstrating that the federal government possesses the military capacity to crush internal rebellion, but actively chooses restraint. It establishes a track record.
But he immediately follows that olive branch with a very sharp thorn.
He issues a clear warning that this restraint should not be mistaken for weakness.
Right. He states that Ethiopia's patience has limits, and it will respond decisively to safeguard its sovereignty if the international community fails to pressure Egypt and these proxy actors to back down.
That is the very essence of a deterrence posture. You advertise your capacity for violence while simultaneously advertising your preference for peace.
It feels like a coiled spring.
Oh, I like that analogy.
They're showing immense restraint right now, keeping all that military potential compressed. But I really struggle to reconcile the two realities the author presents.
How so?
Well, how does a nation balance an IMF projected 9.2% economic boom building international airports and mega dams while simultaneously maintaining a coiled spring for a multi-front regional war?
It's a tough balance.
Right, because preparing for war usually drains the resources needed for that kind of astronomical growth.
Well, the economic boom and the military deterrence are actually two sides of the same strategic coin here.
Okay, explain that.
On a practical level, a booming economy is required to fund a modern, robust defense apparatus. But on a psychological level, the author is weaponizing that 9.2% growth rate to demoralize the alleged proxies and their backers in Cairo.
So projecting invulnerability, a message that the wrecking ball isn't even leaving a dent.
Exactly. By highlighting the new airport, the fertilizer plant, and the GERD, the author is sending a psychological message. Despite your best efforts to encircle us, we are still building and we're still growing faster than you.
Wow.
However, the tension you identified is the ultimate gamble of this piece.
Because a coiled spring cannot stay compressed indefinitely under pressure.
Precisely. If a regional war actually ignites that 9.2% growth, the mega projects, the infrastructure, all of it becomes immediately vulnerable.
War consumes infrastructure. It doesn't construct it.
The author knows this. His final warning is a high-stakes diplomatic wager. He is betting that the terrifying prospect of Ethiopia finally uncoiling that spring and triggering the global domino effect we discussed earlier will be enough to terrify the international community into intervening.
To restrain Egypt before a single shot is fired.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is trying to win the conflict through deterrence to protect the economic miracle.
So, synthesizing this entire landscape, we are looking at an incredibly intricate web of causality. You have colonial-era water grievances colliding with modern economic imperatives.
Right.
You have fragile peace agreements allegedly being shredded to serve the strategic interests of external powers. And you have a nation attempting to balance runaway economic growth with the very real threat of unleashing a regional meltdown that could reshape the security architecture of two continents.
And, the value of dissecting singular, strong viewpoint pieces like Abarayas is that they remove the sterile abstraction from geopolitics.
They really do.
We aren't just reading hydroengineering statistics about cubic meters of water flow.
Yeah.
We are reading the deep-seated pride of a nation protecting its development, the profound grievance against perceived historical injustice, and the simmering threat of retaliatory violence. You get to see the actual psychological machinery driving state behavior.
It really forces you to confront the human and political realities that raw data often obscures. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final detail pulled from the margins of our source material.
Oh, yes, this is important.
It might actually be the most destabilizing element on this entire board.
I agree.
The article includes a photograph of the charred remains of a tank on a road in southern Tigray. It's a genuine image from clashes that occurred on March 3, 2026. But the author's caption contains a chilling caveat.
He notes the evolution of the information space since the previous conflict.
Yes, he points out that while the 2021-2022 Tigray conflict was heavily inflamed by online rhetoric, we are now dealing with an entirely new weapon.
AI-generated images.
AI-generated images.
The introduction of synthetic media into this specific environment is a profound wildcard. We have spent this entire conversation analyzing a region where perception dictates military action.
Right.
The coiled spring of deterrence relies entirely on both sides, accurately reading reality.
Just think about the fragility of the dynamics we just mapped out. We have a dispute over existential water rights, alleged proxy armies moving in the shadows, and historical animosities just waiting for an excuse to erupt.
Yeah.
Now, inject AI-generated misinformation into that powder keg. Imagine a hyper-realistic deepfake showing a bombed section of the GRD or an AI-generated video depicting a massacre of civilians in Mekelle by federal forces.
In an environment where the ENDF and regional militias are already on high alert, a fabricated image could easily bypass diplomatic verification channels.
Easily.
It could provide the immediate visceral spark that convinces leadership they are under attack, forcing them to uncoil that spring and launch a preemptive strike based entirely on an algorithmic illusion.
It is the invisible, uncontrollable variable that upends traditional statecraft. All the deterrence theory, all the historical water treaties, and all the international pressure campaigns are entirely useless if the actors involved can no longer agree on basic visual reality.
Completely useless.
So the next time you see breaking news or a viral image coming out of the Horn of Africa, ask yourself, is the geopolitical move we are witnessing a reaction to a genuine threat or a reaction to a synthetic spark designed to burn the entire board down? Let that sit with you.